So one day I get excited and Google the best games made with Unity. And what I see are some of the most famous games including Pokemon Go, Alto Adventure and even Temple Run. That really got me excited. So I decided to make my own game and I go ahead and install Unity and open it for the first time. Hey everyone, welcome to another video on Snack Games. In this video, we are going to talk about the basic interface of Unity and how to use it. Alright, let's have a look at the editor of Unity and all its components. We mainly have 4 components, starting off with the Hierarchy tab, then the Inspector tab, then the Scene tab, and then lastly we have the Game and Project tab. First, let's look at the Hierarchy tab. Before moving on to the Hierarchy tab, we need to first look at the most fundamental aspect of Unity, that is, a game object. Everything, I mean everything in Unity is a game object or a child of a game object. So what you have in the Hierarchy tab is a scene and all of its game objects. There can be multiple scenes and each scene can have multiple game objects. So to give a context, I have created 4 different game objects, and if you compare it to a game, it can be a player, an enemy, a health which can be taken up by the player, and maybe a boundary wall. So this is how game objects are defined in your game. The next thing that we have to look at is the Inspector tab. Now once again, before moving on to the Inspector tab, there is one more concept that we need to understand, that is components. Components are the child of a game object. So as we can have multiple game objects in our Unity, each game object can have multiple components. So let me bring in the Hierarchy and Inspector tab together to give you a better clarity. Now as I said, each game object can have multiple components. So if you see, I select a game object from my Hierarchy tab, and in the Inspector tab it shows all the components that are associated with that game object. There are hundreds of components that can be added, but for now we just need to focus that a game object can have several components, and this is the navigation we have between an Hierarchy and an Inspector tab. So components basically define the characteristics of a game object. As I said, there can be several components that can be added to a single game object, and that defines the characteristics. For example, you want to add physics to your game object, you have some physics components. You have rendering components. You have audio and effects components. Even code that you write for your game object is a component. Look at the physics components. There are so many of them that simulate the real world physics behaviors, and all that is readily available in Unity. Now once you add a component, each component has its own characteristics as well. The buoyancy has density and surface level. The collider has an offset value or the size of the collider. Now say we want an enemy that can fly or doesn't have any gravity applied. What do? We go to the enemy game object, add a component called rigid body, and then we see you have a gravity scale that you can make it as 0, which basically means that there is no gravity. So it is that easy to define characteristics for your game. Now removing components is as easy as adding them. So let's go ahead and remove the components that we have added. But there's a catch here. If you see, we go to any game object, player, enemy, health, we can remove all the components except transform. So always remember that transform is the default component for any game object and it cannot be removed. So what is transform exactly? It essentially is the XY coordinates of your game object. So transform component basically is the position of your game object. So it's quite obvious why you cannot go without that. So moving to number 3 and 4. 3 is your scene tab. So scene tab is the place where you create and define your game, and whatever you create in your scene is displayed in the game tab. So that is the importance of the third and fourth section. So let's quickly walk through of constructing a small scene and see how it looks. So what I have done is simply added images like the mountain, the enemy, the grass, all these are images, but when they are added into the scene, they become game objects for Unity. So essentially this is how you start constructing your game in Unity. Alright then, hope this video was helpful for you all to learn some baby steps on Unity. Thanks for watching, see you in my next video.